Welcome to the Elliott High Network. I'm your host, Elena Martin. The Washington Teachers Union has launched a major initiative called Learning Doesn't Stop, Lessons on TV. Let's check out Mr. Capatano from Lafayette Middle School. In the first lesson, Mr. Capatano will be discussing comparing the size of the product to the size of the factors. Lesson 2 will be conducted by Rachel Thomas. Ms. Thomas will be conducting her lesson on social studies. Let's check in with our teachers.
My name is Mr. Capatano. I am a 5th grade teacher at Lafayette Elementary School here in Washington, D.C. And today I'm going to walk you through a lesson of 5th grade math that focuses specifically on comparing the size of the product of a multiplication problem to the size of its factors. Okay? So today we're not going to be doing a whole lot of calculation, just thinking conceptually about what kind of products are we going to get if we look at and identify the factors in the problem. So before we get started, I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement on the vocabulary. So you'll see here in a multiplication problem, we know that it's made up of factors multiplied by factors, which will give us a product. All right. So let's look at the first example that I have for you here. So I have here 9/10 times 8, which means that we're going to get an answer or a product that is less than 8. Why? Because 9/10 is a factor that is less than 1 whole. Since it is a factor less than 1 whole, we know that the product is going to give us going to be less than 8. Right? And we know that because 8 times 1, or any number times 1, is going to give us a product of 8. So any number times 1 will give us that factor, right? And so additionally with that logic, we know that any factor that's greater than 1 whole multiplied by 8 will give us a product that is greater than 8. All right, so let's take a look at some problems together and do a little bit more practice. So here I'm asking which expression below, A, B, C, or D, is going to be greater than, less than, or equal to 2 meters. So let's take a look at the first example. We have here letter A, 2 meters times 97 hundredths. What kind of product will we get? Well, let's look at the factor that we're multiplying. So each one of these problems has a common factor of 2 meters, right? Because we're trying to decide what our products are going to be. So here, we're going to look at 97 hundredths. So the question you have to first ask yourself is this factor of 97 hundredths greater than, less than, or equal to 1? That's right, it's a little bit less than 1, which means that our product for this problem is going to be less than the whole, which is 2 meters, right? So we know that 2 times 97 hundredths, this is the same value represented as a decimal, will give us a product that is less than 2. Right? And if we think about that same concept here for letter B, 2 meters is our common factor, multiplied by 101 hundredths. So again, we have to ask the question, is 101 hundredths less than, greater than, or equal to 2 meters? Excuse me, to 1. Less than, greater than, or equal to 1. That's right, it's greater than 1. So here's the same value represented as a decimal. 2 times 1 1/100th, or 101 hundredths, is going to give us a product greater than 2 meters, because this value is greater than 1 whole. And then here for letter C, you'll see I boxed out here 100 hundredths, which means that this is the whole, right? 100 hundredths is equal to 1, which means that the multiplication product we're going to get is going to be equal to the factor of 2 meters. All right? So again, just to recap, 2 meters times a factor that is less than 1 is going to give us a product that's less than the 2 meters. 2 meters times a factor that's greater than 1 is going to give us a product greater than 2 meters. And 2 meters times 1, or 100 hundredths, is going to give us a product that's equal to 2 meters. Okay? Now, let's take a look at letter A and B here. Are the answers of the products that we're going to get more or less than 19 4/10? Well, let's take a look. We're multiplying 19 4/10 times, can you name this factor? That's right, it's 96 hundredths. So we're going to take a look and identify whether or not this factor is less than, greater than, or equal to 1 whole. That's right, it's less than 1 whole. And since it's less than 1 whole, we know that the product that we're going to get is going to be less than 19 and 4 tenths. So here we have that represented as 19 and 4 tenths times 96 hundredths is less than 19 and 4 tenths. Okay? And we're going to do the same thing here for this problem. Let me change the color of my marker here. Let's take a look at this factor. Can you name this factor for me? Yeah, it's 2 hundredths. So ask yourself, is this value of 2 hundredths less than, greater than, or equal to 1? Yes, it is less than 1. Since it's less than 1, again, we're going to have a product that is less than 19 and 4 tenths. And we can express that here. 19 and 4 tenths times 2 hundredths is going to give us a product that's less than 19 and 4 tenths. So here's the last question I'm going to ask you to consider before we move on to showing you some visual models. Which answer is closer to 19 and 4 tenths? Well, we have to compare 96 hundredths to 2 hundredths. How close are they to the whole? The best way to do that is to use a visual tape diagram. So let's take a look. So here we have represented 19 and 4 tenths times 1. That's what this rectangular tape diagram is expressing here. Okay. When we compare that to 19 and 4 tenths times 96 hundredths, we look at how close we are to the whole, which is 19 and 4 tenths. Right? So if we look at the difference here, we're just only 4 slight little hundredths away from our whole, right? Which is 19 and 4 tenths. So we're pretty close. 19 and 4 tenths times 96 hundredths is only slightly less than 19 and 4 tenths. Conversely, though, if we look at 19 and 4 tenths times 2 hundredths, my goodness, look how far we are from the whole, right? We have all of this ground to make up to get close to 19 and 4 tenths, right? Compare that to 19 and 4 tenths times 96 hundredths. Look how different they are. Which one is closer to the whole? Well, 96 hundredths looks way closer to the whole here than 2 hundredths, which looks very far from the whole. So we know that 19 and 4 tenths times 2 hundredths is a lot less than 19 and 4 tenths. So to go back to our previous question, which answer is closer to 19 and 4 tenths? 19 and 4 tenths times 96 hundredths is going to be much closer than 19 and 4 tenths times 2 hundredths. Okay? Similar question here. Will the products of these two expressions be more than, less than, or equal to 1 and 73 hundredths? So again, I'm going to change my marker color here. So we're looking for products that are more than, less than, or equal to 1 and 73 hundredths. So let's take a look. Those are our common factors here in these two problems. A common factor is 1 and 73 hundredths. Okay. And we're going to multiply those by these two values, 1 and 2 hundredths and 29 and 1 hundredths. So let's take the first problem. First question you're going to ask yourself is this factor less than, greater than, or equal to 1? That's right, it's a little bit more than 1 whole, which means that our product, since this is more than a whole, is going to be more than, right? It's going to be more than 1 and 73 hundredths because our factor that we're using here is more than 1. Additionally, looking at letter B, we have 29 and 1 hundredth times 1 and 73 hundredths. So again, we have to take a look at this factor and ask, is this greater than 1 whole? Is it less than 1 whole? Or is it equal? Yeah, this one also is more than 1 whole, guys, right? Since this number is more than 1 whole, we know that the product that we're going to get is going to be more than 1 and 73 hundredths as well. Okay. Now here's the question. Will the products of these two expressions be slightly more or a lot more than 1 and 73/100ths. They will both give us a product that is more than 1 and 73/100ths, but the question is, which one will give us slightly more than 1 and 73/100ths, and which will give us a lot more? Right? So we have to look and consider again, how far are we away from the whole? Which one of these two factors, again, let me use my marker here. Which one of these two factors is closer to 1? Yeah, 1 and 2/100ths is way closer to 1 than 29 and 1/100th. So this product is going to be slightly more than 1 and 73/100ths, while 29 and 1/100th is going to be a lot more than 1 and 73/100ths, right? Because of its distance from the whole. Okay. Now, if we fill in the blank for these problems here, we have to consider the same concept. So we're going to fill in the blanks using one of the following scaling factors to make each number sentence true. So, for example, we'll take a look at 3 and 4/10 times something is going to give us 3 and 4/10. Should it be a number or a factor that's greater than a whole, less than a whole, or equal to a whole? We want 3 and 4/10 times something equals 3 and 4/10. Yeah, it's going to have to be 1, because we know any factor times 1 is going to give us that factor again, right? So 3 and 4/10 times 1 equals 3 and 4/10. How about here? We want a product that is greater than 21/100ths. So we're going to look for a factor that's also greater than a whole. So which one of these two factors is greater than 1 whole? That's right, it's 1 and 21/1000ths. So because 1 and 21/1000ths is greater than a whole, when we multiply that by 21/100ths, we know that the product is going to be greater than 21/100ths. Okay? Which means by process of elimination, we're going to put this one here, but let's just double check and make sure. 8 and 4/100ths times a factor less than a whole, 998,000ths, is going to give us a product that is less than 8 and 4/100ths. So that checks out, and that makes sense. Okay. So when we are doing these problems, folks, we're not really considering what the actual answer will be. Again, this is a conceptual, theoretical understanding of multiplying numbers and what kinds of products you're going to get. So when you sit down to do these problems with your 5th grade math group or in the Eureka Math, this goes together with lesson 24 in module 4. So if you want to take a look at those lessons, those work with these problems. And again, as you're doing these problems, consider what makes the most sense. If I'm multiplying a number that is slightly greater than 1, like in this example here, the number I'm going to get is a factor that is greater, or a product that's greater than the factor I'm multiplying by. If I'm going to, if we're going to we're going to multiply two factors, and one of them is less than 1, we know that our product is going to be less than that factor that we're multiplying by. And we also always know that any factor times 1 will give us that factor again. Again, my name is Mr. Capatano, and this has been our lesson on comparing the products of multiplication problems to its factors.
Hi everybody, welcome back to another wonderful Wednesday. Before we get started, remember to stay home and stop the spread. Also, remember to wash your hands with warm water and soap. Today, we're going to be going over 5th grade social studies. Let's get started. Today is going to be a read aloud of Social Studies Week 4, Day 1 for 5th grade. If you have your packet, follow along. If not, get ready to listen up and pay attention. How is culture reinvented? This is our line of inquiry, and we're going to be dealing with one supporting question today. In answering that supporting question, we're going to complete a close read of a text and answer text-dependent questions. We will be focusing on Source A, the long-lasting legacy of the Great Migration, if you're following along in your packet. Our objective today is to analyze the changes that migration brought. This image is the painting by Jacob Lawrence called The One-Way Ticket. It illustrates for you, the reader, how African Americans left by train in droves to the North and the Midwest. Our first supporting question is, what caused the Great Migration? By the end of the text, you should be able to answer that question. Before we do a close read, let's front load some vocabulary. starting with Archibutula. This is a small farming community in the state of Mississippi. Jim Crow, a time period where state and local laws permitted discrimination against African Americans. Reconstruction era, the time period after the Civil War. Assembly lines, the factory machinery that made production more efficient. Before we get started with reading the text, make sure you have a pen or pencil to annotate as you read. Remember, good readers annotate their text. The long-lasting legacy of the Great Migration. A little boy boarded a northbound train with his grandmother and extended family. It was 1935. They would not be permitted into the dining car, so they carried fried chicken and boiled eggs to tide them over for the journey. The little boy was 4 years old and nervous. He'd overheard the grown-ups talking about leaving their farm in Archibutula to start over up north. He missed his mother, who would not be joining them on this journey. He did not know when he would see her again. His grandfather had preceded them north. He was a hard-working, serious man who kept the indignities he suffered under Jim Crow to himself. In Mississippi, he had not dared stand up to some white children who broke the family's wagon. He told the little boy that as black people, they had no say in that world. His grandfather was so determined to get his family out of the South that he bought a plot of land, sight unseen, in a place called Michigan, a state in the North. The desire to be free is of course human and universal, but concentrated in the South, as they were, and held captive by the virtual slavery of sharecropping, many African Americans had no ready means of making a go of it in what were then faraway lands. By the opening of the 20th century, the optimism of the Reconstruction era had long turned into the terror of Jim Crow. In 1902, one black woman in Alabama said, "In our homes, in our churches, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered together," she said, "there is a discussion of what is best to do. Must we remain in the South or go elsewhere? Where can we go to feel that security which other people feel? Is it best to go in great numbers or only in several families?" These and many other things are discussed over and over. The door of escape opened during World War I, when slowing immigration from Europe created a labor shortage in the North. To fill the assembly lines, companies began recruiting black Southerners to work the steel mills, railroads, and factories. Word soon spread among black Southerners that the North had opened up. The people began devising ways to get out on their own. Now, make sure you are ready to answer the text dependent questions. The first portion of text dependent questions that we're going to look at and answer are focused on what does the text say and how does the text work. Question number 1. Why did the little boy and his family have to bring their own food for the train ride north? You should go back to the first paragraph of the text for your answer. Are you ready to answer? Okay. So there are several different answers that can be provided. One could be that food may be scarce or limited. As stated in the text, it said there was no options on the train for African Americans. And also, it could provide them the ability to save money during their trip. Good job. Let's move on to question number 2. Why did the little boy's grandfather buy land in the North? Of course, you should be using your text to answer the question. So let's find the answer in the text. If you answered in paragraph 4 that he was determined to get his family out of the South, then you are right. Some other possible answers could be that owning land meant status, securing a legacy, ensuring they had somewhere to live, and establishing themselves financially. Those are all really great answers. Let's continue. What opportunities awaited African Americans who moved north during the Great Migration? Well, according to that final paragraph, if you already found it, good job. It states that the immigration was slowing down in the north, and from previous learning, I can connect that African Americans were taking the jobs and filling the place of the immigrants. So they were taking jobs in steel mills, railroads, and factories, as stated in the last paragraph. Other answers could be that they were taking jobs that were not just agriculturally based, because as mentioned in the text, sharecropping left them limited. Sharecropping? Have you ever heard that word? Well, sharecropping is when they took a portion of land and rented it and farmed it. They were able to keep some of what they harvested and they would sell the rest. However, the land was not theirs, so they still had to pay rent on the land. It was very hard for people to make money off of that. So that's why when they were finding jobs in the north, it was really great because they were able to find jobs that were not just farm-based. They were also able to own land because, as mentioned with sharecropping, you did not own the land that you harvested on. So they were beginning to own land in the north. And also, from prior knowledge, I know that some African Americans started their own businesses to support themselves and their families. All right, let's keep going to the next question. Question 4 shifts from the previous elements, and this one is anchored in, what does the text mean? What does the text inspire me to do? So think about those things as you read these questions. Text opinion question 4. Why do you think the author started the text out with a story about the 4-year-old boy? Some possible answers are to show the age range of people going, the intergenerational impact, which means that families were separated. As it stated in the text, his mother was not going, but he was going with extended family. That could mean an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, grandfather, and his grandmother, or his father. Sometimes families were broken apart during the Great Migration because of the cost of travel or what jobs might be in the north. Another possible answer is to relate to the reader that even children traveled during the Great Migration. Let's move on to the next one. Do you think the Great Migration helped expose the problems of race in the South? Why or why not? Well, as you studied the Civil War this year in the 5th grade, you should know that race and slavery was a really big problem in the South. However, after they were freed, there were still many issues to tackle. So, this one is opinion-based. If you were paying attention last week, we went over opinion-based writing. This could be a quick opinion-based paragraph stating your answer. So here's a hint. State your opinion. Make sure you use your text evidence to support your answer. And follow up with an explanation of how the text supports your thinking. That way, you can best answer the question by showing what you think, supporting what you think, and explaining why the text supports your opinion. Coming up next, you're going to examine Source B biographical information and artwork. So tomorrow, you're going to be looking at historical figures of the Harlem Renaissance and will complete a See, Think, Wonder activity. The Day 2 activity requires you to examine Source B, which has biographical information and artwork from historical figures of the Harlem Renaissance, and will complete a See, Think, Wonder activity. Regarding your See, Think, Wonder activity is a graphic organizer that allows you to jot down your thought process as you read the text. You can see What do you observe in the artwork? What do you notice? Think. What do you think about what you saw or read? And wonder, what questions do you have now about the artist, the artwork, the inspiration, or even this time period? There may be some other things that I'm not covering, but by all means, use your creative minds to help you complete this activity. After you've read about the different artists, if you are not working through your learning plan, Jacob Lawrence, who's most notable for his panel series on the Great Migration, Augusta Savage, who was a sculptor and a prominent citizen in Harlem, Aaron Douglas, who was a painter, and Palmer Hayden, who was a painter. That's my time for now. Thank you for joining me, and as always, I look forward to having these rich discussions about ELA or social studies. Have a wonderful Wednesday, and I will see you back here next week. And for further information and resources, please visit the WTULocal6.net. Stay home and stay safe. Stop the spread.